Hey, everybody, welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. And man, are we again talking the what's really trending in America right now, stuff you're going to want to know about. Now, everybody probably by this point is aware that the United States has again attacked another foreign country overnight, this time in Yemen, because of all the things that have been going on in the Red Sea with the shipping being interdicted by Yemenis rebels. Who are a Iran-backed group that has been in support of the Palestinian people. And they've been saying, hey, we're going to attack any Israeli-based shipping in the region to bring pressure, to bring more food and other kinds of aid into the people of Gaza. That's been their claim anyway. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But because they were unwilling to listen to any of the threats made by the United States, the U.S., UK, and several other countries last night, since attacked 60 targets within Yemen, blew up all kinds of stuff, 100 missiles altogether. It was a pretty complex operation. It's still not clear all the results of it, at least on the ground in terms of what got blown up. And it's obviously even less concerned about what's going to happen in the aftermath, though we do have some pretty good ideas that it's not going to be the way we want. But for this show here, I want to look at a different aspect of this, and that is the legality of it. How much does this follow American law, the U.S. Constitution? Because, folks, that is something that's really crucial. And we have no better person in America to talk about this today than constitutional scholar Bruce Fein, who's a friend of mine. I've known him for many years. He's an amazing person. Used to work in the Reagan administration as I believe it was a deputy assistant attorney general.
Associate deputy attorney general.
Associate deputy attorney general in the Reagan administration. So, and man, he has just been out front and is more deeply knowledgeable on matters of the Constitution and how it affects our governments than anybody in America. And I say that with all sincerity. Bruce, we're so grateful to have you on today.
No, thank you for inviting me, Dan.
And I wish, like so many, that this was somebody we could just bring on and we could talk about all the stuff you've done, your experiences, which are incredible, all the places that you've been, people that you've talked to over the years. But today we need your expertise here on unraveling what really isn't that complicated of a situation. It's a mess, but it's not that complicated. And that is, does the U.S. Constitution, does the 1973 War Powers, we'll just start with this premise here, does it give the president of the United States the ability to basically do anything he wants militarily for 60 days? That's kind of what the people say all the time, is that, yeah, he does have the ability. Now, after that, he has to come to Congress. That's kind of the default position people say. What say you?
No, it is a preposterous position, Dan. And I go in some detail in a recent book that I've published called Congressional Surrender, which means that Congress has acquiesced in presidential statements that they'll not pay attention to the War Powers Act in any event. But let me try to go through very methodically for the audience, and most of them probably not being lawyers. Their Constitution supersedes a statute. The Constitution is quite clear that only the Congress can declare war. And that was understood by everyone at the Constitutional Convention, including the presiding officer, George Washington, the chief author, James Madison, to mean only Congress could authorize the offensive use of the military, meaning that it wasn't responding to an actual attack like Pearl Harbor, when it had already broken the peace. And that was universally understood. And when a situation arose under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, which was similar to the kind of threat that the Houthis have to freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, this was the Barbary pirates. They're demanding ransom of U.S. ships that wanted to trade in the Mediterranean. And some of them had declared war on the United States. And Thomas Jefferson went to Congress and got over 10 statutes saying, I need you to authorize me to do more than just, act in self-defense if my sailors are being attacked. 10 statutes. He understood. And it was the same argument that's made today. Well, you're interfering with freedom of navigation, which was going on then. You got to pay ransom, otherwise you're not getting into the Mediterranean. And that is the clear understanding and meaning of the Constitution. James Madison, the father, repeatedly wrote, the wisest provision in the Constitution was that entrusting the war power exclusively to Congress because it has no conflict of interest. He explained that war is the nurse of executive aggrandizement. In war, the president gets the jingoism, the patriotism, the appointments, the glory, anyway, all of the unity that you can expect. So it creates an enormous incentive to concoct excuses for war.
Mm.
That history has actually borne that out. You remember Harry Truman was in problem, and he called our war in Korea, which he never got a declaration for. Danny, he called it police action.
Yeah.
A police action. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers dying, going to the brink of nuclear war, a police action. And we know Lyndon Johnson lied about an alleged second torpedo attack in the Gulf of Tonkin. Anyway, you go on and on. We have the imaginary weapons of mass destruction in 2002 to get the Iraq
too soon. That's too painful.
Yeah. So it's all these things go on. But anyway, the Constitution is very, very clear. And remember, the Constitution trumps a statute. A statute cannot override what the Constitution prescribes. And it even has gone so far as the U.S. Supreme Court saying that since Congress has the power to tax and to raise revenue, it can't delegate it and give line item veto power to the president. This case called Clinton versus New York. There's certain subjects that are required to be exercised by Congress. They can't delegate them anywhere else. Just like, it couldn't delegate, the Senate can't delegate its power to confirm Supreme Court nominees to the American Bar Association. You can't do that. It upsets the whole idea of checks and balances. And so the Declare War Clause has been around for 230 some years, never been amended, never been proposed to be amended. And that establishes the violation of Mr. Joe Biden in attacking the Houthis without having any plausible claim of responding to an actual attack on Americans.
So here's what he actually did say. This is a quote from the president. He said, "These attacks have endangered U.S. personnel, civilian mariners, and our partners, jeopardized trade and threatened freedom of navigation. More than 50 nations have been affected in 27 attacks on international commercial shipping." And then he goes on to talk about all the other people that have been involved. And he says, "This is the response of the international community, these reckless attacks that have been against the United States, and we launched Operation Prosperity Guard." And he goes on to say, basically saying, yeah, because there was a threat to it. So if there was a threat to the U.S. or its shipping or its personnel, does that work, especially for the 1973 War Powers Act? And I wonder if you can talk about that, because people hear a lot about the 73 War Powers Act in conjunction with the Constitution. And some of the things that are very specific in there. And this is where some people get this idea that the president has 60 days to do what he wants. Does President Biden, is he authorized to do what he said here?
No. It's understandable why persons might be confused by the War Powers Resolution. I was here in Washington, the Justice Department at the time involved, because it's intellectually, it's almost incoherent. For example, Danny, one provision, I think it's section 10, says, "Nothing in this act shall be interpreted to disturb the constitutional allocation of war power between Congress and the president." Well, if it's not doing anything, then why did you pass the act at all? It makes it meaningless. Then it's also ambiguous about, it says that if the president deploys troops abroad, and Congress, he's not required to necessarily to bring them home unless Congress prohibits it in 60 days. But it's unclear whether that means that he's authorized in the first instance to deploy them there. It may just be that there's a violation, which I think is true anyway, because Congress can't authorize the president to violate the Declare War Clause. Congress could not, for example, Danny, pass a statute saying the president can go to war anytime he says he considers the national interest requires it. It can't do it because it destroys the whole purpose of checks and balances. And we understand exactly what does happen when the president exercises that kind of authority. Then we got all these huge messes, Vietnam, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, now Ukraine, who knows, Gaza. We're almost a co-belligerent in Gaza by providing the weapons that are being used in the war. Even if you read the War Powers Resolution to purport to authorize a war for 60 days, which doesn't make sense since the act specifically says You cannot interpret this to disturb the allocation of the Constitution's war powers. And the Constitution
Now,
says you have no power to begin a war for 1 day, for 1 hour.
here's the ironic part, Bruce, is that now, based on what President Biden just said here last night, and that what I just read there, you would think, well, I guess he just doesn't know. But that doesn't quite line up with what we also know, what he himself said just a few short years ago.
Presidential notification of Congress about the need to exercise war powers cannot be satisfied in 280 characters or less. Mr. President, you have to explain your decision and your strategy to the American people. Democracy runs on accountability, and nowhere is it more important than the power to make war and bring peace. You're required to work with Congress, Mr. President. You're required to abide by the War Powers Resolution, Mr. President. And you cannot pursue war with Iran without consent and authority from Congress.
Ouch. Now, that was in a result of the President Trump's attack or assassination, rather, of the General Soleimani from Iran in January of 2020. That was in the presidential campaign season, which is why then candidate Biden was talking about that. And if anybody had any doubt about what he thought, he put it in a tweet himself where he said that let's be clear, Donald Trump does not have the authority to take us into war with Iran without congressional approval. Now, all of a sudden, Bruce, it seems like he forgot about that part.
No, not only that. In 2008, when he was running for the Democratic nomination, he expressly said not only would George W. Bush have no constitutional authority to attack Iran without a congressional declaration, he emphasized and shouted from the rooftops, I will lead an impeachment charge against Mr. Bush if he does that.
Oh,
and he
man.
emphasized that.
Yikes.
And in conjunction with the statement, Danny, he said, I know what I'm talking about because I teach separation of powers. I talk with all my smart professors at Harvard and Yale, and I know exactly what the Constitution means. We know how manipulable and insincere Biden is by thinking about his standing as vice president when Obama, without any congressional declaration, turned Libya into a wilderness. He did nothing. And Joe Biden said nothing, didn't go to the president. After all, he's sitting in the EOB, the West Wing's just a few steps away. Why didn't he go in there and say, like he said to Mr. Trump, Mr. Obama, you can't do this. You need a congressional declaration. He was completely silent. I wrote an article at that time and said, he sounds like Brutus. It's not like I love the Constitution less, but I love my power and President Obama more, that I'll stay silent. That's not law. That's opportunism. That's politics with ulterior motives as a substitute for the rule of law as king.
And Bruce, I just want to kind of bring into here while we're talking about this stuff, because this is not just academic. This is not just, well, this is what they ought to do, but this is, it's not what they do. There are some real potential major ramifications to this kind of activity. If it goes long enough, it could cause us real problems. And right now, I think taking advantage of an opportunity, people are saying they're not censuring Biden for doing this. They're saying, dude, you need to do more. Watch this clip here from the military side, from General Jack Keane, who's he's not the official spokesman, but he sure talks for a lot of people in the military community. Here's what they think he should do next.
The center of gravity for the aggression in the Middle East that we're experiencing is Iran. We have said this time and time again. To deter the proxies themselves by hitting them will not be sufficient. We have got to go after Iran.
So let's see if later today, in light of this, because that was just this morning, President Biden remembers his words there to then President Trump and says, you can't go after Iran without congressional approval. Do you think that's going to happen?
There is no way, Danny, that Congress would pass a declaration of war. We can think of the most recent instance in 2013. President Obama asked Congress to declare war against Syria for the alleged chemical weapon use. It didn't even get out of committee. He got no support. the American people overwhelmingly contacted their members in the House and said, no way. It did not happen. Previously, when President Clinton went to Congress, he wanted a declaration of war against Serbia for the abuses against Kosovar Albanians. Right? Congress wouldn't approve a declaration. So Clinton said, okay, I'll just go to war, but I won't call it a war. I just bomb the heck out of Serbia and not call it a war. And this shows the genius of James Madison. He knew that Congress, because there's nothing in it for Congress to go to war. They shrink in terms of power. So they want real proof that this is a real national security issue.
Because I think Bruce perfectly, I guess, demonstrating what you're talking about there. What James Madison was afraid of was this kind of attitude. And I don't mean to pick on President Biden, but he sure has given me a lot of opportunity, making it easy. He says this.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
That's not the guy that you want pulling the unitary string of whether we go to war or not. Somebody who, is so bragging about how awesome we are. We're the most powerful, meaning we can do anything we want to. And you see that play out in its policies like this one.
Yes, and he's kind of echoing Madeleine Albright when Madeleine Albright was arguing for the use of the military, tells Colin Powell, well, what do we have the great military for unless we're going to use it? No, you're supposed to try to deter war, not create it and go look around the world for the hornet's nest so you can bust it open and then claim an excuse when the bees start to sting you. You have to fight back. It's lunatic, Danny. And let me tell you why it's so portentous for the future. The underlying theory here, really it goes back even to Afghanistan and Iraq in 2001 too, is this idea of anticipatory self-defense. Well, nothing's happening now, but in a few years' time, things could get worse. So we're not going to wait for the mushroom cloud. Oh, they're learning mathematics. Pretty soon they'll get to quantum mechanics and they'll build a nuclear weapon. So let's just assassinate them now. I mean, there's no stopping point. Anticipatory self-defense in a domestic situation, it would be like claiming self-defense if you said, well, I had a dream that somebody was going to shoot me in my bed, so I went over and killed them. I mean, they'd laugh you out of the courtroom if you said that's
on your way to prison.
Yeah, okay. And this is what the ideas come. Well, Iran may do something down the road. We don't know now. And therefore, we go ahead and attack them in advance. I mean, look at what would happen if the other nations used that against the United States. I mean, we'd be attacked by hundreds of countries around the world. That's a formula for chaos and nothing but war after war after war. And that's what gets so dangerous here. When he says, oh, well, the Houthis, they're a threat at some time. I know, but you're not responding to an actual attack on the United States. You need to go to Congress if you want to cross that Rubicon. And Congress, Congress I guarantee would never vote to authorize war against the Houthis. Never in a million years.
So speaking of Congress, it's not just the military and Jack Keane, but it's also, he's a punching bag too, and he's easy because he's always out front and loves the camera. But Lindsey Graham is this morning also saying, hey, let's go after Iran.
You'll never get Iran through their proxies to back off until you hit Iran. And you'll never get stability back in the Mideast until you tell Iran, we're going to hit you if you keep using these people against us. I'm not talking about invading Iran. They're a oil-rich nation. Knock out some of their refineries.
That's not really war. We're just going to knock out a few refineries and just kind of make it hard for them. That's not really war. So, that's kind of cool. But what, how prevalent is that? Because I know you spend a lot of time up on the Hill. How prevalent is that among members of Congress?
Well, listen, the fact is, Danny, members oftentimes, they make these boisterous statements. But when it comes to actually voting on war, they do not want to go there. I remember in 2002, they were angry when they were even presented with the authorization to use military force against Saddam Hussein. Why are you making us vote on this? The Republicans as well. We don't want to vote on this. You do it yourself. If it goes south, we'll blame you. So Lindsey Graham may say that, but even Lindsey Graham didn't vote for a war against Syria in 2013 when Obama asked him to do that. He didn't. He backed away. Tom Cotton wouldn't vote on it. Ted Cruz wouldn't vote on it. So yeah, all these people make
That tells you
all these warlike, belligerent statements. They're not going to vote for it, and that's been proven true for 200 and some years. The only time Congress has ever voted to declare war is when there was an actual attack, like Pearl Harbor, or like in War of 1812, when they were the British were basically kidnapping our sailors and impressing them into the British Navy to fight Napoleon. Or when Congress was duped into thinking that the other side had attacked us, like Mexican-American War, the submarines, and World War One, or Gulf of Tonkin resolution, duped into thinking that. They're not going to do that. And they say because they have an understanding that the greatness of the United States is having invincible self-defense, and our influence abroad is the influence of example. Think of this, Danny. We sent tremors all throughout Europe. In 1791, with the French Revolution, we had no warships whatsoever. We had the Constitution and we had the Declaration of Independence. We had the principle that the rule of law is king, the king is not law. Other than that, we had no projection of military force anywhere. In all of Europe, these kings and emperors, they're frightened to death of the United States because we're giving their people ideas, government by the consent of the governed. That is the way we spread democracy, by example, not at the end of a bayonet. That doesn't do anything but create tyranny everywhere. You know, and that's, we got to understand that. We have idiots basically running the government.
So let me ask you this, Bruce, what can be done? I mean, okay, so we're talking about it here. You've been publishing things. I know you've been beating this drums for a long time. You have so many on the media that literally that they have loved that 60-day thing in the 1970 War Powers Act. They don't read any of the rest of it. And by the way, as I tweeted out earlier today, there are direct provisions in there that says the president can only use force if we're attacked, like Pearl Harbor, if there is an imminent threat to us, or if congressional authorization has been given. That's it. It expressly says that's it. So even in that one, it says only 60 days, and yet all they ever hear is 60 days and the president can do it, and that's just like a default position. So how do you break through all that? Is there anything that people can do to try and hold the government accountable for the Constitution?
Well, they should write into their members of Congress. We know Biden is going to do it, and say, we want you need to stop this right now, because it is a threat to spread to an actual attack on Iran. And we may be with Hezbollah in Lebanon. We may be like the Marine barracks blow up that we had under Reagan. And into Syria, who knows? It could explode like World War I, goes from Sarajevo to an Archduke Ferdinand to the entire world. Who knows? I mean, war is very, very indeterminate. And why are we doing this? It's not the United States. Come on. It's an existential threat. Utterly ridiculous. And I say, if we want to, and we understand, mankind's imperfect. We're not going to be able to create paradise everywhere. But if we want to optimize freedom and a rule of law, we need to do it by example. And example will be powerful. The ideas themselves will take root in these other countries, and they will take care of themselves, like the French Revolution took care of the monarchy in France. It took a while because it got some reverses, but that's the way that we do our influence. And it's not because we think the whole world is going to turn into Canadians. It's not. But we know that go down the permanent war route means we then become like the enemy.
See, the reason why I love that, Bruce, that whole it's mental construct is because you're not saying, hey, let's disarm, let's not have a military, so we'll just be peaceful. You want an invincible defense. That's always stood out to me that you said that. You want a strong national defense, not an offense that goes out trying to bomb everybody every time they do something we don't like, because all that does is undercut our moral authority. It undercuts the very influence you're talking about in the ability to make other people afraid because of the ideas. Because if we don't live the very values that we try to, beat everybody else over the head with, nobody's going to adopt those values.
No, you're exactly right. And I call it invincible self-defense. I'm not a pacifist. I mean, I don't have any reluctance in saying, with our invincible self-defense, if you in fact do attack us, you will be annihilated. Otherwise, you leave us alone, you can do whatever you want, but you will be annihilated if you attack us, and no one will touch us, for sure. Because human beings are not inclined to commit suicide. maybe on a retail basis, but one suicide bomber is not going to overthrow the United States, as bad as it is. And I'm not trying to defend suicide bombing. And that is what we can do and what we should be doing. I do think we lost our way, Danny, when instead of making liberty and the march of the mind the glory of the United States, we started to do Joe Biden and Madeleine Albright. Oh, we're the indispensable nation. We're powerful. We can do whatever we want. We can go to the moon. Hey, can you turn straw into gold pretty soon? Really? Come on. This is hubris on steroids. And whom the gods will destroy, they first give the belief that you're the chosen people who can do no wrong. That's the first step towards self-ruination. And that, unfortunately, is where we're going right now, unless we change. And you ask, what should the viewers think? Pound Congress right in and say, this is not acceptable. You need to tell President Biden you're going to impeach and remove him from office if he continues this. If he has a good claim, make his argument to Congress. He should be able to convince you. The members of Congress, they salute the same flag. They listen to the same battle hymn of the Republic and the Star-Spangled Banner. They stand at the same seventh inning stretch. They're no less patriotic than the president. They have no incentive to expose the United States needlessly to danger. If you can't convince them, there's something wrong with your argument.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, if Biden was emphatic about potentially going to impeach President Bush over the same thing, then I think that, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak. But I think that's really the issue right there. There's a lot of stuff going on where people want to impeach every president now for whatever they want. But man, this is something that comes close to actually being a violation of the Constitution. There's some substance here. Not that I want anybody impeached. I just want him to follow the law.
Yeah, exactly, Danny. And let me explain why with Biden it's very, very dangerous. He already has at least on 4 occasions said unconstitutionally, if China attacks Taiwan, I'm attacking China, which is, insane. You're a lunatic. But he said that without any reference to Congress at all, even though when he was in Congress himself, he voted for the Taiwan Relations Act, which specifically provides in Section 3 that if there becomes a security danger to Taiwan, the Congress and the president shall respond according to our constitutional processes. And Joe Biden, as senator, voted for Section 3. And now he's defied it on 4 occasions, says, no way. So this guy's out of control. He is out of control. He needs to be brought to account and said, listen, you continue to do that. We need to have you on the record now saying you made a mistake. You are misinterpreting the Constitution and you are going to comply with it. And Congress is going to have to declare war before you do this. He's also said in the same line that under Section 5 of the NATO treaty, that he's going to go to war against Russia if it attacks any NATO country. That's not what NATO says. NATO says constitutional processes shall be followed. And he ignores that as well. So this guy he's out of control. And that means he's got to have a shot sent across the bow. I agree with you. We don't impeach just for the sake of impeachment. We want compliance with the Constitution. Yeah. We need a security. That's exactly what you're going to do. I've often said, Danny, that we should be having congressional resolutions that give fair warning to the president. If you do X, we are going to impeach and remove you. We don't want to. We don't want to do that. You comply with the law. Fine, great. Yeah. But if you really believe that the United States security is in danger, convince us.
Now, I saw that Ro Khanna and a couple of other Democratic Congress members actually have come out and said this morning that, hey, you're in danger. It's the very same things you said. You're in danger of violating the Constitution. Is there any prospect? I know that, again, that a lot of people up there. Is there any prospect that they could bring such a resolution as a shot across the bow, something underneath an impeachment move?
Well, there is if the American people write in. The fact is that Congress right now, unless they feel public pressure, they got to feel it from the constituents. And that's what happened. That's what happened, Danny, in 2013. The constituents, it was like 400 or 500 to 1. I know because I was up there on the Hill saying, no, we do not want to be involved in war with Syria. And that's why even the Tom Cottons and the Ted Cruz's backed away from it. So that's what our obligations are as citizens. We just can't be idle. And if they get that pressure, Yeah, because they're not getting any letters in right now, or maybe a handful saying, oh, yeah, we would like you to go attack Iran, like Jack Keane would like to do. Where really? And you find people campaigning out to their constituents, hey, we want to send your boys and girls off to go fight and die in Tehran. Really? No one's saying that because they know their constituents would reject that.
Never go for it. Yeah. But yeah, I'd like to have that on the record. Look, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on and providing such crystal clarity to what it is. This is a black and white issue. There's a lot of things in the world that are gray. Most of it seems like in Washington is gray. This isn't one of them. This is black and white. This is right. That is wrong. And if you do this, you're in open violation of the Constitution. And I am so glad you've made that so clear. And truly, I do hope everybody watching this, share this to everybody that you know. And folks, let's get some letters out there. Let's at least start something to get the government to follow the rule of law. This is not an R or D anything. It doesn't make any difference what your political persuasion is. We need our government to follow the rule of law for our own safety so that we don't get sucked into another stupid, pointless, unnecessary war that could have catastrophic results.
Amen.
And so we'll leave it right there then. And Bruce, thank you very much. And we are grateful for having you on today and look forward to having you back on it. Because if this keeps going in another direction and if Biden goes any more, we may need to have you back on to kind of keep us straight on what needs to be done on that too.
Okay.
So thanks for coming.
Okay. I'll stand by. Thanks, Danny. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks a lot. And we thanks to all of you guys too. Truly, we value every one of you. We are in this together. I am just as much affected by this stuff as you are, and we are asking you to do whatever you can, take action. Send something to your member of Congress. Send something to the senator of your state. Let's do whatever we can as individuals to bring pressure. You've seen, we've been having just a couple of days ago that there are some people out there who can make a difference, even though they're not in government. You have a lot more power than you think you do, and we want to help you find that. Thanks very much, and we will look forward to seeing you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.